Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Glad you're here. If it's your first time, my name is Ryan. I am the pastor. It's great to have you with us on this. Was it cold here this week?
Yeah.
Like how cold? What number?
15.
15?
50.
Oh, that's not cold. I was in Pennsylvania and there was an ice storm. So you guys endured nothing. I thought I would start us off with a story today. This is a story I've loved over the years. It goes, once upon a time, there was a woman named Nianzhen, and she worked for a merchant high atop a hill. Nianzhen worked as the merchant's laundress, and every day she had to walk down the hill to collect water from the stream. When she was young, Nianzhen made 2 pots to carry the water, and these she hung upon a pole she could carry over her shoulders. She painted one pot blue and the other pot red. And the years passed, and as Nianzhen aged, so did the pots along with her. One day she noticed that the blue pot had developed a thin crack along its side. She ran her finger over the crack inside. My poor little pot. As always, she carried both pots down the hill and filled them to the brim with water. By the time she reached the hilltop, the pot with the crack was half empty, but this still left her plenty of water for doing the merchant's laundry. Over the next 2 years, Nianzhen carried those pots down the hillside each morning. And when she reached the stream, she filled them to the brim, and afterwards she walked back up the hill, balancing the pole across her shoulders. And the blue pot was only ever half full by the time she reached the summit. Though the crack in the pot was growing longer, she chose to leave it as it was. What she didn't notice was that the blue pot was miserable. Each time it drank from the stream, it secretly hoped that this would be the day that all of the water would stay inside. But as always, when they reached the top of the hill, the pot knew it had failed. In its resting place on the far side of Nianzhen's little hut, the blue pot worried and wept and said, "I'm no good, I'm no good, I'm no good." "Stop your whining," the red pot answered. "No one wants to hear from a pot." I also think it is that this time in the story where we find out that Nianzhen did a lot of LSD because these pots are talking. Opiates, I guess, because this is happening in the East. One day the blue pot woke and the crack had expanded so wide that it assumed that Nianzhen would decide to throw it away. Soon it would be of no use to her for anything at all. That morning as she climbed the hill, she was startled to hear a voice she had never heard before. "Nianzhen," the voice said, "throw me away. I'm no good for anyone or anything." She stopped and looked around, wondering who could be speaking to her, and the voice said, "I'm right here," as the pot swang back and forth to get her attention. "It's me, your blue pot. You made me with your own hands when you were younger. But I see that now my time is finished. The crack in my side has made me useless. When you carry me up the hill one final time, throw me away, because I am broken." Nianzhen replied, "But pot, you don't understand. You haven't been paying attention. You've never looked up and looked around over the years." And she pointed to the path leading up the hill beside them. And for the first time, the pot stopped looking inward at itself and looked outward at its surroundings. On the right side of the hill, leading up it as far as the eye could see, the pot noticed beautiful flowers growing in abundance. Poppies, I told you she was doing opiates. Peonies, as far as the eye could see. "Now look at the other side of the hill," Nianzhen said. The pot glanced to the other side and saw that it was bare. "I've always known about your flaw," Nianzhen said, "and so I planted seeds on your side of the path. And every day you water them and add more beauty to the world." It seems that brokenness is often the price of beauty. Churches are interesting things, at least they are to me. Over the past 19 years, I've worked in 4 different congregations, and each of them seemed to exude some qualities that were unique to them and them alone. The first congregation that I worked in was all about having a spiritual experience. A great deal of time and emphasis were placed on how one could tangibly experience God in everyday life. The second congregation I worked in was all about conversation and community. A great deal of time and emphasis were placed on how truth and trust could come about by having authentic conversations with one another. The third congregation I worked in was passionate about justice for those on the margins. A great deal of time and emphasis were placed on bringing awareness to the unaware about the plight of those who were being overlooked in the world. And each of these congregations and their mission has stuck with me today. They're still very much a part of my life and my work. The fourth, and hopefully the last congregation that I will work in, is this one. And it's taken me some time to fully recognize what our thing is, if you will. But I'm beginning to see a common thread weaving its way through our story as a community. As I think about who we are, I think of us as a community wherein the broken find healing. And as I've gotten to know the stories of those of you in our congregation over the past 15 months, one of the things that stands out to me in your stories are how so many of us entered the doors of this building for the first time, deciding to give God and faith one final try. For many of us, faith, spirituality, belief, whatever you want to call it, was one of the only options that we had left when we first entered these doors. We might have entered in the aftermath of trauma, religious, relational, financial, or otherwise. And we hope that in this place, we would find an environment where we could heal at our own pace. Even me, as a pastor, each week that I come into this place, I find myself leaving our gatherings feeling a little more seen and a little more loved in spite of all the broken pieces of my own life that I'm asking God to heal. We're a community wherein the broken find healing. I might be wrong about that. Maybe that doesn't define you, but I think that just might be our thing. And guess what? I have the microphone. If you've been coming here for any length of time, you know what a summer it was for us here at CIB. This whole place was literally being ripped apart and put back together. The room that we're sitting in now was disassembled and retouched and repaired and then finally reassembled. And when our leadership first started discussing renovations to our nave, though we might have argued vigorously over some of the details, like the patterns on the pews, which I think I actually won on that one because we didn't put patterns on them, and colors of paint and all that kind of stuff, there was one thing that we were all unanimous about. That was that we didn't want to just tear everything out and build a brand new church. We wanted to keep everything about this place that was already beautiful and draw more attention to it. So we didn't throw out the pews and the woodwork and the stained glass and the communion table and replace it with Swiss minimalism, buying something from IKEA. Instead, we decided to restore these things. things. We brightened up the place so that we could see one another when we came into the room. We rearranged the pews, which I stand by my decision. I know some of you guys don't like it, but it's right. It's the right decision. So that we would be reminded that this is about a circle and not about a back-to-front hierarchy. We put the communion table, the Eucharistic elements, right in the center of the room so that we would be reminded that the center of all of this is that our shared wounds and our brokenness are what help us to discover unconditional love. Gary brought something to my attention in our remodeling that I'd never thought of before. And it couldn't be a better metaphor for who we are as a church. We were talking about the renovations one week, and he said to me, "I'm glad we didn't take out the stained glass." And I said, "I am too." And for those of you who've never taken time to analyze the stained glass here, it's the same artist that did the windows in the National Cathedral, but it tells the story of Scripture as you go around the room. I'm sure Gary could tell you that story afterwards for a nominal fee. $10 a head?
Just the bell. Just give me the bell.
But Gary went on to say that the reason he liked the glass so much wasn't just because of its obvious beauty, but because of what stained glass represents altogether. Broken pieces of glass that on their own would just be useless. But when they're pieced together with other broken pieces of different colors, they create a beautiful work of art and tell a story of hope and restoration and unity. And I'd never thought of that about stained glass before, so thank you, Gary. It seems that even these temporal things in this room, wood and stone that will corrode over time and we'll probably have to fix again at some point. Even these outward things tell a story about who we are as a church. A place where things that are marked and battered are restored and assembled into something beautiful. Another passage from the book of Isaiah says this: God announces good news to the poor and brings healing to the heartbroken. God causes beauty to sprout from the ashes. God rebuilds the old ruins and raises a new city out of the wreckage. As the earth bursts with spring wildflowers and as a garden cascades with blossoms, so God will bring your life into full bloom. And wherever you are in your life today that's led you into this place this morning, is it possible that you could take to heart the idea that the healing that you want to see in your life cannot and will not take place in a vacuum, even if it's a Dyson? What if that's true? Unless you've lived your life in solitary in a cave far away from civilization, you've had some trauma. You've had some breaks. You have some wounds. We all do, myself included. And it's okay that you're dented. It's okay if you're here and you are, as Brennan Manning once put it, a person who arrived at God's house bedraggled, beat up, and burnt out. It's okay if you are a series of random shards that don't make any sense or fit together with all of the other broken pieces in your life. Congratulations, you're one step closer to hitting bottom. And as much as you can, I want to encourage you to engage and trust the people you see sitting around you. Bringing all that you are, the good, the bad, the fear, that one remaining thread of hope for a better life that you might be hanging on to for dear life. Because we need your broken pieces to be a part of this mosaic. I need them, and whether you believe it or not, you need them too. We need one another. There are plenty of blank pages in the story of this community. There are as many pages as you need to add your chapter to the narrative, even if your chapter tells a long, sad tale. Your chapters matter, and the story is unfinished without you. I had somebody ask me this weekend, after preaching for 19 years, I could just do the lazy thing and just recycle them every, at some rotation where you wouldn't know I was recycling. I had somebody ask me, do you ever recycle your sermons? And I said, believe it or not, when I first moved here, I was in such bad shape that I recycled all of them. They weren't recycled to you, but they were to me. For those of you that don't know, I moved to Bethesda after just going through a divorce. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. And I would sit down to write on Friday or Saturday, and there was just no blood going to it. There was just nothing there to say. And so I reached back into my files and my theological detritus and pieced some things together. And I got up here each week and reading through those old sermons, it was almost as if my first 6 to 9 months here, I felt like I was reminding myself of what I believed. I don't know what you thought about it. Maybe they were terrible. I was reading these things and realizing, Ryan, you have to believe this for yourself too. It seems that the easiest thing in the world is to extend forgiveness and love and empathy towards others. And then we look in the mirror and none of those good qualities apply. The hardest thing in the world is to forgive oneself. The hardest thing in the world is to look at oneself and think, that person is worthy of love, that person is worthy of respect, that is a person of dignity. A person who deserves to be happy and to have wholeness. It's so easy to do that for everybody else, but often so hard for us to do it for ourselves. And I think that's why the kingdom of God is something that is talked of more as a collective and less as a group of isolated individuals. Because when we see someone else and we're able to extend grace and love to them so easily, it reminds us that we need to do that with ourselves too. We need to smoke what we're selling, if you will. We need to take our own medicine. And as you go about your life this week, as weird as it might seem, I try to do this in the morning sometimes, and sometimes I don't. But I try to look in the mirror in the morning and just think good things about myself. Even if it's just for a flash, just for a second. I try to remember that I'm a child of God too, and all of this stuff about forgiveness and brokenness and healing applies to me too. It's not just something that I tell others to make them feel good. Apparently our sound system is in need of healing. So let's do that this week. Love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the greatest command. Don't forget to love yourself while you're loving those around you. You bring something to this community, and we need it, even if it's got sharp edges. Let's pray.